Here's my snake so far. We've left off with him traveling along the spline. And to make him move, we're going to grab the snake, press our W command on the keyboard, and drag him along the x-axis to follow that spline. Okay. Now my head on my snake stretches a little bit because I've pulled a few of those joints out just a little too far, but I can tweak those later. But what I want to do now is towards the end of his run, get that mouth to open. If you remember, earlier I put a morph influence in. You can actually see a morph right here. We did it a little more old school where we right-clicked and added it that way after we created the morph. Either way is fine. But we created the morph with the open mouth. Now, we built it closed, so technically we're kind of backwards, but it'll still work just the same. If we select the morph influence, the strength is 100%. We call it mouth closed. If I make this 0%, you can see that the mouth opens. So that's great. Now we didn't do the head at all, and I'm going to do that a completely different way in the next video. So let's do this. We're at frame 0. Our morph strength is animated. We have clicked that so that it's a red dot. It's animated. 100% strength and mouth closed. Then let's animate the snake. So what we'll do is select the snake, press the W command, and then I want to create a key. So right down here at the bottom, create a key. And you'll notice that for the transform, we've got a keyframe right there. And I'll lift this up just by clicking and dragging up. You can see things a little bit better. You get a white little tick mark right there. And let's take a look at the transform. You can see that the position is all keyframe because I had a transform on, I hit key, and we get the red dots. Now let's say he snakes around, and we've got 120 frames by default. So down here, let's just take our preview and our actual time. Let's make it maybe 300. And when I do that, you can see that two things happen in our timeline. The timeline itself still says 120, but down here, my little preview bar, which I can click and drag, actually gets shorter. It still reads 120. Well, what this is doing is that you have a preview time and you have a full length time. And sometimes if you got a really huge scene, you might need to concentrate on just a short amount of space. So here I'm just concentrating on about 2 seconds. It gives me control over very specific keyframes. And I can drag this little preview window, so to speak, this little preview bar, to have sort of a window of just 2 seconds of my animation. I can grab this bar right here at the end and pull it so that we're seeing our full 10 seconds, which is 300 frames, or we can go back all the other way. You can do the same with the front too. You can grab the front and do that. So this preview bar is just a way for you to just kind of move around a short amount of time within your animated scene. You can also just double click it and it'll expand instantly to fit that. So that's what happens if you don't put in the value right here, but you notice that that first value of these two, that is our preview right there. Alright, so we have 300 frames, and let's say at about 250 or so, I'm just going to click right here in the timeline. That's where I want my next action to happen. And what would that action be? Well, that would be the snake at the end of the run. So I'm just going to grab the X handle and slide him along like this. And now notice that there's another keyframe automatically and that this green bar appears. What that means is those keyframes are interpolated between those two and animated. And if you look, the reason that happened is because this auto key down here is set to animated. Sets the auto key mode. You can turn that off if you want, so you can manually create keyframes. But typically, the way you're going to work is you're going to move to a point in time, change something in your scene, and it will automatically record. You can always go back here, and the reason I raised this up, again, just this is our default, kind of like that. Move your mouse over this bottom bar, click and drag up. You'll get this key window, and you can actually click on here and slide this to adjust those keyframes quite easily. You can right click on that key and copy it, shift it, scale it. Scale it will multiply, shift would add or subtract. You can add an auto key in terms of its motion, not auto key create, but you can use manual, you can make it linear so it stops very hard, so very quickly you can make some changes to those keys. Also over here in this blank area, you can right click and you can open the graph editor. You can shift scale and set a pre and a post behavior. So if you have things repeating and rotating, you can do it very easily right there. The graph editor is also right here, which we haven't talked much about, but we'll get to. That is the graph editor where we can go to the individual channel that we just created and adjust it as well. We'll come back to that. So let's take our camera. Let's go down here to render because we're doing this all at once. Normally we would say, okay, this is animation and this is your camera, but it's kind of better to see it all put together. So how do we get our camera down there? Well, I'm going to do this a little bit easier for myself. It's going to come down here because our perspective view is pretty close as it is. And I'm just going to hold my Alt or Option key and my Command key, and I can just rotate like that, or I can click and rotate this way up here. Just click and drag in the interface. But I'm going to do it this way with a little more control. This is the one area of Modo that's a little more difficult, is setting up this camera, I have to say. All right, so let's say I like that, right? I'm going to select my camera from the item list right there, and I'm going to hit Sync to View. And that's going to take this perspective view and put it into my camera view. Why did I do it like that? Well, my camera was pretty close to where I wanted it initially in this perspective view, so it was a little bit easier just to set that up than to kind of restart in this camera view. And if you drag our timeline, and this is one thing I should do now too. Let's go File, Save As, Animated Snake. It doesn't save over our original. If you drag your timeline, you'll see that snake coming up around. And we could put a rock in there that he's kind of fishing around, which would be good. And it looks like I got a little bit of a bump going in there, which is kind of cool. All right, but let's get back here to 300 because we want this mouth to open. So let's say right about 240 or so, just before he lands, he's going to open his mouth. All right, so we're going to go back to the morph influence. Now notice that the strength is 0%. Well, we don't want that yet. We want that to be still 100%. You know what? I need to come back to my Animate tab because the preview render is trying to catch up and render for us. So right here, about 220 or so, I want to create a key for the strength for the morph influence. And we want that still 100%, which means the morph is closed. It looks like I got a double keyframe there. And I could see that because it's a little bit thicker. So I'm going to right click and cut that one. There we go. So now, if you take a look, we've got a few extras here. I'm going to right click and cut this. As I was showing you things, I was accidentally adding keyframes. All right, so 100% strength, mouth closed at 0. It's going to stay that way all the way to here, and then maybe over about 10 or 15 seconds, 10 or 15 frames, we want that open. So we're going to hit this key again and make this 0. Now, the automatic key is on. I could have just made it 0 and it would have automatically made the keyframe for me. But so now he comes forward and then the morph happens. And then we can, of course, be a little more creative with the camera. I'll save that. But that is how you can add two influences on one object doing two different things. So we've got the morph influence opening the mouth, and then we've got the spline animating it, and then the transform, of course, is moving along the spline. So I'm going to wrap up this snake right here for this portion. I want to do one more thing where I can show you how you can use a transform influence, a transform effector, to open the mouth as well as the head. So let's do that in the next video.